I want you to take a deep breath and just for a moment, consider a time in your life when you've had to say no to something. Perhaps something that was really meaningful to you. Perhaps something that you knew would actually make a difference, would get your foot in the door, but it just wasn't packaged, just didn't have exactly the conditions needed that would make it most beneficial. And imagine the rest of your community expecting you to say yes. Make it your society expecting you to say yes. What does that feel like in your body? What impact does that have on your soul? Have there been some times when you've had to stand up for yourself or stand up for what you believed in for the benefit of others? All of these questions are going to be answered, at least in the life and experience of my very special guest today. So grateful. My name is Valerie Hope. You all know that Time to Come Alive is this weekly opportunity to have a wonderful opportunity to speak with somebody who brings life to some corner of their world. And today's no exception. We have Sharon Barbosa Crain with us this morning. And Sharon and I had the benefit of meeting each other at a holiday party, actually, here in the Dallas area, Dallas, Texas area, at the Irving Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And Sharon, I remember, and it was actually, we weren't even introduced to each other. I think we just happened to be sharing a moment of eating brownies or something right next to each other. And I remember we got into this very fascinating conversation. And when you shared some of the things that you've been up to in your life and how you've been, what I think was more of an activist in your community throughout your lifetime, I was just so taken by what you shared with me and your spunk and your energy around it that I thought, oh my goodness, I have to have Sharon on my podcast. So welcome to Time to Come Alive, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Valerie. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's really an honor that you'd consider that I had anything worth contributing to your really excellent podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that, but absolutely you do. And it's always interesting how I come across there's a sensation that I get when I'm speaking to someone that tells me, yes, this person. and I remember when I brought it up to you, I said, would you like to be a part of the podcast? And you said you had no experience with the technology that I was talking about, and you'd never actually done anything like this before. So first of all, I'm honored that you would trust that and still say yes. But what I was really fascinated though in our conversations were you seem to be, in my experience of you, was that you have such clarity about what you say yes to. When there's this quote, let your yes be yes and your no's be no. It just seemed to me throughout our conversation that kept coming up for me, that you had such clarity in what you said yes to and what you said no to. Where does that come from?
Well, I think it comes from experience and introspection. The first thing you have to have in life is a foundation. And hopefully parents are teaching their children that. Hopefully parents have that. Because without a foundation, you got nothing to build on. We often talk in Christianity about the sayings of Jesus, and remember the story about, he said, well, blessed is the person who builds his house on a rock, and unfortunate or cursed is the person who builds it on the sand, because when you build on the sand, the winds come and the rains blow and it beats on the house and it falls down. But when you build it on a rock, all of these things happen, but it sustains itself because of the foundation you built it on. If you go to build a building, you got to have a foundation. So all of these things come back to you. And if you learn that younger in life, then you'll begin to look at the experiences in life. Most of our experiences are just day-to-day things. They just happen. We are not all living on mountaintops. We are always living down here. Maybe we're not living in the depths of the bottoms, but we're somewhere down here on semi-level ground, trudging from one point to another. And we get to feeling sometimes that it doesn't matter, that, and we don't even think about it mattering, but it does. So you develop this clarity by looking at what has happened to you, what has happened to others. Please, God, don't let us have to learn everything personally, you know. And,
Hard lessons, yeah.
yes, you look at those things, and then you have some introspection. You look at yourself and you say, what do I believe? What do I think? What makes me afraid? What encourages me? And you learn those things not out of conceit and not even out of self-preservation, but out of the desire to have an ability to really live life with an abundance. And so that's what you do. And over time, when you look at it that way, you'll develop some clarity. Now, clarity doesn't mean I staked out my position and it's never going to change and I'm telling you exactly what it is and you better listen to me. That isn't clarity. That's bossiness.
I've had those two confused sometimes in my life.
Yeah, so have I. Got 4 children.
I'm curious though about how soon did you discover this? Because it sounds to me like, you know, from a young age, at least some of the examples you shared, these thoughts were coming up for you. So what was that lesson that taught you that this is how you wanted to live?
Well, it was many lessons. I was brought up in a society where, you know, in my age, you know, children pretty much behaved and obeyed their parents. And even if even if you thought your parents might hear about what you were going to do or doing, you thought twice about it. So there was really a different way of approaching things, but also women did not have the position of empowerment that we have today. Therefore, you tended to let people tell you what to do a lot as a woman, not just because that you grew up. Children have to learn to be adults, so they're not born grown, as my mother would say. And so not just that normal evolution into making decisions and being your own boss in many instances, but also the societal pressure that said women should do things a certain way. So there were moments of clarity along the way. And I didn't become what I should be in some of these things when I was young. There were many times that the clarity came after I didn't do something that I really wished I had. I remember one instance, my kids were young, my former husband and I were members of this church and we were very active. And there came a time to vote at a business meeting on whether or not to take some money and transfer it to something that was totally not that was not donated for that purpose. And so when it came time to vote on it, the only 2 people in church who spoke against it were my former husband and a lady whose husband had come in and built a bus ministry with children in the neighborhood. And she was just considered his helper. Nobody paid that much attention to her, thought she's an outspoken old woman, you know. Well, she was, and she stood up and she explained very eloquently why this was an inappropriate transfer and she would not support it. When the vote was cast, those 2 voted no. Everybody else except me voted yes. I didn't vote. I just sat there. Later, I said, and I didn't say that was a moment of clarity, but it was. It taught me, don't be a coward. Sometimes you don't say anything because that is the best thing you can do, either for whatever reason. I mean, Jesus said, don't throw your pearls before swine, you know. Sometimes we don't put things out there that we think or believe because it's not going to be helpful. But other times we have to learn that sometimes silence is assent, as my mother would say, one of her many old sayings that she used.
Silence is a what?
Silence is assent. You're assenting to something. If you're silent in the face of something occurring, many times, not all the times, but many times. So that's a point of clarity. I had a bunch of others, like when I'd volunteered as a young woman to help in a statewide campaign on a matter that was on the state constitutional amendment, and I was very much supportive of the no side. Well, pardon me, I have this sinus allergy, and so just please don't be offended by my constantly having to have a sneeze or something.
No offense taken.
So I decided to go and volunteer, took my time and my husband's time to take me to downtown Dallas to see the head of this state campaign. And there was a church that was spearheading this campaign for no. And I thought, I've got experience in organizing programs and public speaking and so forth, and I'll just go volunteer. And I went down and volunteered, and that man was most unreceptive. In fact, he was rude. He told me he didn't really need my services. They had people they were paying to do that. And I said, but I'm here to volunteer. And he again told me he didn't need me, but there might be a secretarial position open in his office if I'd go to this particular office down the hall from his big office. And it was only a minimum wage job, but I might be able to do that. Well, I was so offended, I didn't know what to say. I just said, well, no, thank you. I'm not here to apply for a minimum wage secretarial job. And I left. He did that because I was a woman. Plain from his attitude and the way he spoke and the references he made in the longer conversation. And I never forgot that. And so as things went on in my life, and there was an opportunity to stand for something or be somewhere, not only was it an opportunity for me personally when I recognized it to stand up for something, it was often an opportunity for me to include other people and help them get to the point they wanted to be. When I became a member of the city council, one of the things that we did was appoint, and we still do on the council, appoint boards and committees and commissions that are city appointed. I had been on a number of them before I ran for council. And I made it a point to carry in my briefcase in the car applications for boards and committees, so that when people would bring it up, men and women, say, man, I really like that, or I saw such and such a thing happen, wish I had been able to work on that. So, well, would you like to be on the Parks Board? Here's an application, fill it out, and we'll put your name in. And was by that able to include people who really thought they had no place. And I didn't have any place either, other than I had gotten that position. Well, it was incumbent upon me, and it's incumbent upon us all to not just empower ourselves, because if you empower yourself, what have you done? You've just gotten the upper hand on somebody. But if you empower those around you for good things, then you have made the environment better. And so that's those kind of clarities on that, on civil rights, on a number of other issues, that just these moments in life that teach you something that you never forget. And you never back away from it after then.
You're clearly really committed to transforming or to impacting your community. What is it about the community that you're in that makes you so passionate?
Well, really, we should be passionate about where we are, period. My mother, whom you heard me refer to, she had an old saying for everything. And I mean everything. Some of them she made up. Some of them I cannot repeat on a broadcast. Oh. She was a little colorful at times when my daddy wasn't listening. But she used to quote a song she sang in Vacation Bible School. It was Brighten the corner where you are. And she said that what that meant was that no matter where you are, you can do something positive. You need, even when you have to call attention to something negative, see if you can't find a solution. See if you can't offer something beyond, I hate this, stop it. Although, as a mother, I said that plenty of times.
My mom does say something similar, bloom where you're planted. That's her go-to. What made you decide that communities was the area you wanted to brighten?
Well, I kind of evolved into it because as a young mother, there's a lot of things, there's just a lot of things you can't do. You know, today we think, well, we can do everything. Well, maybe we can do it all, but do we really have the ability to do it all well? Do we really like it all? And so when you got a lot of little children, sometimes there's not even that ability. And so all my kids were little stair steps. And so I was just doing things to be a good mother. And we took them to church. And so I was very active in church. I sang in the choir, taught Sunday school, did this and that. And it always, even when in high school, I was a public speaker. So I always had little opportunities to do things, but I wanted to do more. And my mother made me join the PTA. I said, no, 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 I don't need to join anything. And she prevailed upon me. If I ever wanted to know anything about schools or my kids in schools, I joined the PTA, which I did, and became very active across, not just in my local schools and school district, but in the region, in the state, and even in some national projects. And it was very enlightening and informative in the day. And just a few years ago, the PTAs in the state of Texas were the most powerful educational force in the state. Today, that's not so. But it was then, if a PTA adopted something at a convention and took it to the legislature did it. Our schools were much better organized, were much calmer, were served the parents and the students better than they do today. I'll just tell you frankly. But so I've just, if you don't mind that phone ringing in the background, I couldn't get it silenced. I'm going to ignore it, and we'll just let them talk or say what they have to say, and it'll be done.
This is part of your clarity. Yes, we're focused. We're focused here. Everybody just focus on our conversation. Forget what's happening in the background.
Ignore my office phone. So I evolved into the PTA, and from the PTA, I evolved into city activities. And so from there, I became involved in something I'd always been interested in because my family was also interested in it, and that's politics. And so once you get out of the volunteer, just the strict volunteering, let me be on this committee, let me make it work, you start figuring out why that committee can do anything. Well, why can it? Because there's a governing body somewhere that's going to take what that committee did and decide what to do with those situations or recommendations. So that way I got involved. And ultimately, even though I've worked in campaigns and on stuff outside of the community, I have stayed very involved in our local community because this is where you live every day. You can do something that makes your local community better. And it's not always being the Pollyanna, everything is wonderful, because everything isn't always wonderful. But when you discover something isn't wonderful, try to have some type of recommendation of how it could be better. It's okay to tell people things are wrong. It's not okay to tell them they're wrong and not ever be part of the solution. So
I had a boss that taught me that whenever I would have an issue with something, and he said, well, as long as you bring a couple of different ways that we could address the issue, I'll entertain the conversation. So it taught me very quickly, this was not a seat to complain. It was one to really brainstorm solutions.
That made you think, didn't it?
Absolutely. Before I went in to say something, I wanted to make sure I at least had something, that I could offer in exchange.
And you were much more creative and much smarter than you thought you were too.
He did bring that out. He really, really did. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because it also sounds that you were going against the grain oftentimes when you decided to stand up for something, right? To empower other people or even empower yourself. I'm curious about, what did it cost you, if anything, to make some of those declarations?
Well, you're not always the popular girl in town if you stand up for things, because there are people who really want things to just go along smooth, don't ever rock the boat, cause ripples in the water. And you can't get anything resolved if that's the way you approach things. So sometimes it would cost me being part of a group, but I learned when I was I really did learn this as a teenager. You may, if you have ethics and standards and you're going to stick to those, there's some places you're not going to be invited. And so you just stand it. If you believe in what you're doing, you just put up with it. It cost me a lot of things as far as with men concerned. I've had a lot of less than enjoyable experiences with men, because they tend, a lot of men tend to not want women in the group. And it's still true today. They will often treat you differently than they treat another man. Now, is that because they're treating you like a lady and they want to be gracious to you? A little bit of the time. The rest of the time, it's because they want to continue to feel superior. Now, I'm fortunate that that I have a husband who doesn't feel that way. He may feel I'm superior to him in what I know about government, but he sure as heck knows I'm not superior to him in what I know about repairing something on the side of the house, and, or on computers, which he uses at work all the time. He'll tell me, well, why don't you just use such and such a thing like Excel or something? And I said, I don't use Excel in my work. I hardly ever do that. Well, Sharon, you need to. It's the best thing you could do, la da 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 da. Well, he didn't feel inferior to me at all, So I'm fortunate in that. But a lot of men still do. It's both a product of superiority and pride in one way, and that is a very negative thing, but it's also sometimes a product of fear. They fear that they won't have relevance and they won't have a place if women take their rightful place in solving problems, bringing out creative solutions and resolutions and suggestions. And so we have to care about how other people feel about what we do, not just whether or not we can get away with doing it, but what effect is it going to make? And you can't make everybody like you, and you can't make everybody be happy with what you do. But what you can do is make sure what you do is not done intentionally to hurt them or offend them. Yeah. And it's just real important that we look at that as in our day, we're seeking how we can rise to a level that makes us more comfortable and with ourselves and what we want to accomplish in lives as women or as men.
And well, you're in a lot of environments, it sounds like, because you were really passionate about government, passionate about your community, passionate about policy. I would imagine that you were surrounded by predominantly male environment, right? So what did you do in order to be either accepted or to have influence in these circles that you knew weren't always the most open to you and what you had to contribute?
Number one, my homework.
Homework, okay, say more.
If you go into a situation and you feel like that you're in the minority, whether it's because of your gender, because of your age, or your ethnicity or race, or your religion, or whatever it is that you're in the minority for, the very first thing you better do is your homework. Because if you get in there and you don't know your homework, not only are you going to be disrespected, and maybe rightfully so, but whatever or whoever it is you represent will also be disrespected. When I got on the city council, I was a returning student, and so I would often be dressed very comfortably, t-shirt, big Bermudas, and tennis shoes. Well, my husband bought me for a present right after it was, I don't know, it was Mother's Day or something. They all bought me a new suit. I had a couple of suits and nice dresses in the closet, but I just didn't wear them to class, He bought me this new suit. Well, it was a hint. So it wasn't long after that I ran into the first of dozens, maybe scores of women that I ran into who would say, I am so glad you're there representing me because I never have to be ashamed of you.
I never have to be a what?
Be ashamed of you.
Ashamed.
And so I thought, my parents taught me a lot about grooming, so I better watch that. So from then on, I never went to any kind of a public gathering that I didn't have on a suit and dress clothes, because, just a few years ago, we wore suits all the time. They called them power suits. No, you can wear a really pretty plaid suit with a little lacy top, you can look like you want to look, but dress to fit the occasion. And so first do your homework, then present whatever you have to present with respect and without apology. People don't react well when you tell them they don't know anything.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. Understatement. I don't react well, so maybe they don't either. And I have been accused of telling people, trying to be too bossy or telling them what to do. Now, mind you, those people that told me that didn't tell the men in the room who were doing the same thing and more that don't you be so bossy. Those women might think you're trying to just order them around. No, 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 no. That isn't what was said, only to the woman. But at the same token, remember that old saying, don't ever let them see you sweat. Well, it was a commercial, the deodorant commercial, don't ever let them see you sweat. Well, women had to add another line to that back in the 70s and so forth. Don't ever let them see you cry. So you had to be whatever it was you needed to be. What you can't be is something other than what you are, and be that successfully, or have your projects be what they should be. You always have to remember that when you create a negative environment that has no positive results, then you've really made the situation worse than better. So that's the kind of thing that I had to deal with, and I'm not the only woman who had to deal with it, but certainly I am. And I was on the city council one year. There was only myself. There were no other women on there. And the newspaper reporter said, "Well, is there anything any different now that you're just one woman there and they're only just men?" I said, "Well, one thing, when we travel out of town, I never have to share a room." And really, you got to approach it that way. There is not that much difference when you're dealing with issues between men and women.
What would you say then? How does one, especially as a woman, because you said don't let them see you sweat, don't let them see you cry. How do you manage, especially when you're so passionate about something that you want to see change, and either your thoughts or ideas are not being taken into consideration or being just blatantly dismissed? How do you balance that and still maintain your poise?
Well, determination is the first thing. But we have to realize that today things have changed. And over the past 30 years, and it's more than 30 years, I guess, but things have changed dramatically. They've moved slowly, but the change is dramatic, where even men today show emotion. And in many instances, men do not feel like they have to be the only driving force in a situation. So there's a lot more give and take today than there used to be. But the discrimination, if you want to use that word, and it is still there. So how do you do it? You always keep your cool. And when I said that was an old thing about, like I said, about not seeing you sweat or cry, because today men often don't care if you see them sweat and cry. But in dealing with people, you kind of have to know your circumstances. We had a college professor here. She was she was a American literature professor at one of the universities. And she would give speeches and she would say, the biggest thing you need to know in life is know your dog. Well, everybody thought that was perfectly charming and wonderful. Now, I still don't really get it deeply, but that was her little way of making sure people remembered her point, which is know your audience. You speak. You don't use colloquial terms when you're talking to college professors. You don't use professorial terms when you're talking to homemakers about how to manage installing a new kitchen. That's not, when you're talking to engineers, you don't use medical terms. It is just that simple. Know your audience and know how to deal with the people in front of you. That only comes from paying attention. And it comes from a certain amount of humility. Because if you don't believe anybody can teach you anything, you already know it all. And that's the way you're going to act.
Unfortunately. That's something I've experienced myself.
We all have.
I think it's interesting because I think what you've been describing is really the journey into, especially coming from the background that you came from during the time that you were really coming of age, that there were so many, there were a lot less opportunities for one to, especially women, I imagine more than men, but for people to speak their truth. I would even say men in this case, right? Because you said now they're much more able to express the full range of themselves. There were certain roles and expectations that men had, that women had. If you were single, if you were married, if you were young, if you were old, there were all these very it's seemingly rigid ways of being. What have you noticed as you've evolved in your time on this planet? Where has that rigidity or that structure shown up or dissolved in your life?
Well, there are two things. One is that when you relax the rules and you allow for broader expression, self-expression by people, and also broader self-actualization, because the only reason most people want these opportunities is so that they can do more with who they are, what they have. And so as we go farther into that, the rigidity dissolves somewhat, because otherwise we would not be able to share experiences and share responsibilities. Your boss wouldn't actually pay attention to your suggestions and your creativity. So some of that rigidity has to give away. What we have done in some instances is go too far, and this is actually backfiring on us, in that we've always had what we consider to be national standards. You know, nationally, we have moral standards, ethical standards that we hold to. You don't do certain things to people. You don't act this way in public. You don't conduct yourself in certain ways, use certain language, treat people in certain ways. Well, when you don't have any commonly accepted community standards, then you have no stability of expectation in what you do or what anyone else does. Furthermore, all of these things, when you talk about ethics and morals and what have you, you're talking about aspirational things. Otherwise, we're talking about laws. Mm. And people need aspirational things even when they don't get to take advantage of them because they're mistreated. Why? Aspirational things give us something to look up to work toward, to reach toward. And people who have been deprived of them have something to look at and say, I too can have that and I'm going to get it. So that's what they're trying to attain. We often think it's just material things people are trying to attain. No, in their heart of hearts, the human beings want acceptance, they want belonging, they want productivity inside themselves. Even if they really don't want to do much, you know, they want to be seen as somebody of worth. And so if we don't have any standards, then we don't know if we have worth. It's like my daddy just said that if it wasn't for the bad times, we'd never recognize the good ones.
That's very true.
And it's, you know, unfortunately in life, it is true, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn from everything that happens to you, much as you don't really want to learn it. I mean, my prayer is, God, please don't let me have to go through that. You know, it's not, please let me go through that and learn from it. You know, just tell me. I'm happy to just listen, you know.
I don't need to experience it.
Yeah, I don't have to experience everything now. But today, we have, in our zeal to become more personally empowered, we have now restricted ourselves.
What do you mean?
Because when you have no standard to guide you, nothing to go by, how do you know if you're doing well? How do you know if your behavior is productive? How do you know if it is inspirational? How do you know if it has reached out and created resolutions? And see, all things are not material. You can make millions of dollars a year and still be the poorest person in the country because you have no real self-worth beyond that money or those possessions. You know, if I was judged by my shoes, I'd just be the wealthiest, most important person in the world because I have a bunch of them. Every time I find one on sale, I gotta have it, you know. But that is not the way that you're not picking people to come and talk with you about these important things because of the shoes she had on.
No. I mean, unless the shoes were somehow very
intriguing and represent.
And if it said something about the person. But you're right. I think it was an interesting comment you made about the things that we do are not to acquire more things, but they're to really express a range of ourselves. Right. That's important to us, right? There's a range of expression, there's a range of acceptance, there's a range of connection that we're seeking. And that's really what's driving. I often think about, there's a a woman, one of the first guests that I had on this podcast, and we talked about the ability to express what we really need oftentimes is crowded or hidden by the strategy that we use to try to get it. We don't always say, I need to feel accepted. I need to feel I'm a person of worth. I'd like for my ideas to be taken into consideration. We speak louder. We might be confrontational. There's all these strategies that we employ to get what we need, rather than sometimes just expressing the need and then allowing that to hopefully fulfill on the need. And so that said, what are you up to now that's important to you? Because you've obviously you've been very clear about where your commitment lies and what you align with, but how do you use that today?
Well, I still work, of course. I have my business, and I'm a consultant in public affairs and public policy, and community affairs, and in dispute resolution. So I have a background in real estate and in law, and so in working in those areas. So that keeps me busy as far as trying to make a living. But I do other things. I'm active in my church, and I do various things there, whatever comes along. I've had experience in doing almost anything in a church that there is to do. And then I've been active in the community. As I said, I'm usually stay on the board of a couple of different organizations at the time, mostly human services organizations. I've been a 20 plus year member of our local Salvation Army Advisory Council. And we build a lot of programs and we think we do a lot of good. It's certainly our intention in the community. And I have a group that, two groups. We have a women's group, and we call ourselves Junta. And what the Junta is? Well, if you've ever read, Junto, you see it a lot of times in newspapers talking about some South American or Central American country that's had a takeover in the government by the Junto. Well, Junto is masculine, Junta is feminine in Spanish. And so that's the definition of it is the ruling committee. Well, in our city, many years ago, back when maybe I was just a little child, the leaders of the community formed their own little secret group called the Junto. And so when we decided to have our little group and we were looking for a name, I said, I know, we'll be the Junta. And so we are. And funny story, one of the founders both of the founders of the Junta were friends of mine. And so I told them this story, and they both have passed away in the last few years, which was really funny to them, because I had a member of our group say, Sharon, you won't believe what happened today. I invited my neighbor to come to Junta. And she said, well, I've been wanting to come to that. She said, that sounds like y'all have a lot of fun. And she said, but did you know that there's another group in town that's copied your name? It's a bunch of men, and they call themselves the Junto. Only about 50 years older than we were.
They're copying.
And those two very advanced men saw no threat to that at all. They thought that was hilarious, and they were proud that it happened. But we do that. And then I have a community group called the South Irving Task Force. And we're a private group who either live, work, or have interests in Irving south of Highway 183. And we meet to discuss and recommend discuss conditions and recommend improvements to Irving, both city and schools in that area. And so we're right now involved in putting together a promotional packet on some issues we're going to be pushing for this year in our community, including a quick bond sale for some fire coverage in our old downtown area, and for some parks facilities in the far southwest portion of the city, and some reactivation of our ICT, and it's called our Community Television Network through the cable. We need some improvements there. So those are some of the things I'm involved with, along with the social services with the city. And then we just finished a bond committee, a group of people putting together a recommended bond issue for the city of Irving. And so those are things that I'm going to stay involved in, Lord willing, because they really are critical to a decent quality of life in our city.
Mm.
You know,
And that's never a dull moment, it sounds like, in your life.
somebody said, well, Sharon, you got a lot of meetings. Said, what do you do? How do you make all of that stuff? And I said, didn't you have to give up something? Don't you? And I said, yeah, I gave up housework. But you can
That's
tell by
true.
once a year tearing up my office so I can put it back together again.
Well, you did say that this is part of now your commitment in the next few weeks, or I
Yeah,
guess, right?
I've got to do our taxes and straighten up I'm dragging out all the old files. They're stacked every which way. Got to go through them and determine what you have to keep and what you can store electronically and what you need to throw away.
Well, you mentioned that you read, or you started to read the Marie Kondo.
Yes.
So does anything in your office there spark joy?
Oh, no, I look at that and I say, there's absolutely no way I can do what she recommends. If I started to finish this and I didn't take it incrementally, I'd just start today and I wouldn't be through probably until maybe Halloween.
It does take a bit. That's what I'm telling you. My sister-in-law, and I'd be happy to connect you with her. But I think you have a daughter
I think
that's
she
also
is
very
my
good.
daughters. If I could get a hold of two of them, both of them at once, I think maybe we could finish this thing just like that.
There you go. Well, speaking of your daughters, this whole journey that you've been on since very young of really having your voice heard and stepping into those spaces, whether or not people were ready to hear it or not. How did you raise your daughters? What were the values that you taught them to follow?
Well, I kind of raised my two daughters and my two sons the same way. They all had exactly the same rules.
Mm.
And we didn't, boys didn't have exceptions to the rules. You had an exception to a rule because you had a particular reason to have an exception to that rule, except my one daughter who has always been late every time. We gave up punishing her for missing her curfew because she wasn't trying to miss her curfew. She just can't be on time. And so, but I think that's the first step. Not that you expect boys and girls to be alike, but that you do expect them to have the same values and to obey the same rules. And so that was one good thing. But with my girls specifically, I didn't teach them that they had to take a back seat to anybody. They could be what they wanted to be. And and my boys too, if all you want to do is work down at the in stocking the grocery shelves, who cares? Somebody's got to do it. Respect yourself and respect the job. That's what you do. Treat people like they're supposed to be treated. And that's what I did to my daughters. And I didn't expect anyone to treat my daughters differently because they were daughters instead of sons. And I think that's part of it. And I'll tell you what else. The example you set. I have two quiet kids and two not so quiet kids, a male and female of each. And my older son and my younger daughter were the not so quiet, and they used to, and they'll tell you, if you get to ever have a family get together with us, I'll be so embarrassed because they'll tell you everything they can ever remember, which is everything that we ever did. But they will tell these stories about how that they used to come and try to persuade me to let them do what they wanted to do, why they couldn't obey what I said. And they would tell me, and they'll tell everybody, Mom would just listen to us and listen to us. We'd go on, and she'd just look at us. And when we were done, she would say, go do what I said to do.
Wow.
We would look and say later, we'd look at each other and say, why did we waste our time? And so this is kind of the way it was. They just had, I did have some rules. My mother did say that if children didn't need adults, we'd all be born grown, meaning grown up. And so I do believe that you have to have order, and a household is not a democracy. It isn't even a republic. A household is a total dictatorship, benign, but still a dictatorship. And if it isn't, your children cannot learn what they need to learn because they're not born knowing it any more than you or I were. And somebody taught us, even if it was just that ugly old teacher experience. Somebody taught us we need to be kind and loving to our children and expect them to have standards. They're better people for it. But my daughters today they are the hardest working two young women you will ever know. I mean, if you give either one of them a job, they are going to be number one at it. They're going to be the fastest, the best, the most accurate, the most persistent. And yet they also both have developed in their own ways to stand up for themselves and for others. And what I appreciate about both of them is that ability and willingness to stand up for others.
Wow.
Because, they might not have all had a mother that let them do it.
Well, I think, two things. One is, it's, I think, interesting that you said those moments where they were really lobbying for your for your assent, that you really heard them out. Perhaps did not consider in any deep way that what they were saying would even sway your decision. And it also sounds like you gave them an opportunity to really share, vent, express whatever it is that they needed to get off their chest, and still stuck to your guns.
Besides, sometimes they were entertaining.
How will they present their case? Yes, yeah, I don't have my own children, but I have 9 nieces and nephews, and they're all quite astute. It's surprising how astute they really are, the things that they come up with, the ways in which they build their arguments and their, yeah.
Right. Then you can just see how bright they are.
Yes, very creative and unstoppable.
Yeah, and their personalities start emerging when they're little, and they just grow and grow and grow, and it's really wonderful to watch people grow and to see the positive things that people think and do. That's why we should nurture people more. That's why our schools should be located in neighborhoods, and pull the parents into the schools and let the parents have a lot of say on how things go on. Public education is one of the greatest things this country ever did, to educate every child who lives in this country. And so build on those kind of things. And parents have all kinds of things going for them today. Not just do you have athletics, but you have the ability to still be in different kinds of organizations, to learn music and crafts and visual arts and all kinds of things that parents can help their children do. And yet you can be like a friend of mine who is a high school teacher, who all of whose students were involved in charity work. She had the young historians at the high school. And if you wanted to be a young historian, you had to follow the guidelines, and part of the guidelines was volunteer work. And they regularly did the same thing over and over again at the same places. And then in her classes, she had both underclassmen and then seniors in advanced classical honors, advanced, whatever you call them, in your school. And all the students had the same requirements. Then she gave them a list of acceptable activities. Now there's the adult guidance. You can't just go pick anything out of this list. But they worked in environmental things with the local Keep America Beautiful organization, and they worked in human services by going to a homeless shelter where they stocked and served and cleaned and did that. They had a certain day a month that they did these various things. So when you teach children those things, you really do allow them to express themselves, and you give them greater opportunities. Used to know an assistant superintendent who would always make the principals give kids excused absences when their parents needed to take them with them to go on a trip, because he said travel is education.
Yeah.
So all of these things in life that we can bring, and we have this opportunity today to give to our children. And so we need to. My children knew that on Sunday morning, they might not go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, they didn't stay out that late, but they might stay up that late on Saturday night. It didn't matter. At 7:30, they're out of the bed, having breakfast, getting dressed, be at Sunday school at 9, church at 10. That's the way it was.
They had their, yes. My mother was a very, and has to this day, is such an advocate for community service. And when we're immigrants to the United States, and for her, one of the ways, she's always been this way since she was very young, but one of the ways that she found that she could get her foot in the door really was through volunteering. When we were moving every couple of years because of my father in the military, and so she'd never really had the opportunity to really get into a community and and
Yeah.
sustain any particular work roles. And so she thought, oh, volunteering is the next best thing. And that we always had our summers. I love to share. And shout out to my mom, because at the time, I don't know if I really appreciated all it was meant to be. But in the summer, she would tell all my three brothers and me, you have 2 weeks. You can stay up until 2 in the morning. You can eat Pop-Tarts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you want. You can do anything you want for those 2 weeks. But after 2 weeks, you got to find something outside of the house. And so all of that helped my three brothers become Eagle Scouts. I found some of my best opportunities in my own life, and has to this day guided me in my career because of the type of volunteer experiences that I had. So I 100% agree the impact that parental guidance has. Both my parents, in their own unique ways, had such fantastic influences. But what I hear you also say is that the role of parenting and helping our youth have a bigger voice, having the exposure that they need so that they can be a greater contribution to the communities they live in and to the people that are surrounding them.
Right. We have to first have a structure before we can put things on that structure. And that's what parents are responsible for doing. So parents make themselves and their children happier when they know what they want their household to accomplish. And one of the main things, and letting children express themselves does not mean you let kids roll around in the floor screaming and kicking. I just can't imagine what would have happened to me. I can imagine what would happen to my children.
That is self-expression.
Yeah. So self-expression can take a lot more positive forms than allowing children to do that, because your self-expression, to be really actualized, must not cause harm to other people. Now, if your self-expression is in the area of trying to get rights for people, trying to stop an injustice, it might cause some discomfort from other people, but that's not what we're talking about in this particular train of thought. And in regard to what you said a moment ago about, how did you get your daughters or even your sons to get out and do what they need to do? Well, I have a method, and I have seen both my daughters do this in their jobs. If I can't get something done the conventional way, form a committee. You don't have permission to form a committee. Form your own committee. You bring together people who have the same interests that you have and want to do something, name yourself, and then go forward.
Okay, give us an example of what would that look like.
Well, the South Irving Task Force. We had some issues that we want addressed here in this part of Irving, and they weren't being addressed. And it seemed like to me, ever since I left the city council, nobody's paying attention to them. So we said, well, what can we do? So I called a couple of my friends and said, what if we did this? And they said, man, I like that. Let's do it. So we sat down and we formed a membership list to invite people to. And we set up our description of our group, determine the parameters we'd work in. And we just started. And now the consultants who come to the city to work on stuff call on us to meet with them as one of the focus groups, or one of the groups that need to be included in the discussions for whatever the recommendations are going to be. So these things can work. It's just the latest example.
Wow. So so you obviously get invited now to have a seat at the table, right? You have a voice.
Sure.
But so how are your daughters in the workplace? Because that's an interesting application.
Well,
how are they using
they are as efficient as you'd ever want anybody to be. And they are good to get along with. They know what the rules are and how you can stay inside the rules and still get things done. But if there's a problem, neither of them is shy. And one of them's quieter than the other in her demeanor. She's chatty, just like all the rest of us are. But the other one is very outgoing. But both of them will look at a problem and come up with a solution and then go and take it and ask for it to be done. If they cannot get that done, they will ask for support from folks who are not afraid to suggest things. Ultimately, things like that just frequently get resolved. When there is something that comes down to the employee or to the mid-level, and they need to respond, they both are very strong in their responses. They do their homework and they present something that will work, and they will stand behind it. And if other people criticize it, they just say, sorry, but I'm going to stand behind it because here's what I learned in doing my homework. So those traits are really good in a job, and you can do those kinds of things usually and not get fired. And if you can't do that and not get fired, you probably need to start your own business or your own podcast.
Oh, your own podcast. There you go. Well, this has been such an enlightening conversation, Sharon. I really appreciate the wisdom, and it sounds like your mother just a spitfire when it comes to wisdom.
My mother was a very intelligent woman who gave up most of her life to care for my invalid sister. And so she cared for her, and we all cared for her. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't know everybody didn't have an invalid sister they had to care for, But both my parents were good at talking to us. My dad was a very quiet individual, didn't talk to many other people, but he would talk to you and explain things at home once. You better be listening. And mother liked to talk to you like you were an adult. She didn't do baby talk,
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped. It helped us feel, it helped me feel, at least growing up, that we were all part of the same place.
Yeah.
We all lived in the same world. I could see things through their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things we can do for ourselves and for each other is see things through each other's eyes.
Absolutely. Oh, it's what a beautiful thing to have been given by your parents, right? That's a wonderful, a blessing, really. And I can imagine that, I had a guest last week who talked about having lost her voice, so to speak, right? Not being able to share or see the value in what she had to say until much older, much later in life. But it sounds like your parents from the very beginning, not only what they shared with you, but the space that they gave you all to share back made such a unique difference for the dynamic in your family. And clearly they knew that you guys were going to be up to something, that you would need that voice to be well honed before you went out and revolutionized your corner, right? And you brightened the corner of your particular world.
And sometimes that's all you have, but you can, like your mother said, bloom where you're planted. If you get transplanted, bloom again.
There you go. Oh, best advice. Any final words, Sharon, before we close our time?
I just, our world today is a complex and a complicated one. We have to manage it. The best thing that we can do is to develop the foundation we need and the standards that support that foundation, and then go after what we need to go after, remembering, as I said, that it's most helpful when people see things from each other's eyes.
Absolutely. Well, the people of your corner of the world are so fortunate to have you as their spokesperson, as their advocate, as their champion. Not only clearly see that you've made such great inroads in what you've done, but the fact that you care so deeply about everything that you've done and everything that you do and all the people that you've empowered in the process. So I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to explore that with you this morning.
Well, I'm so encouraged to see that people doing the things that you're doing and reaching out to people and broadening good influence.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for being with us today. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Time to Come Alive. Next week, we'll actually have another special guest. Her name is Kathy Lyons Conrad, and she is what I call a teenager whisperer. In her teen whisperer ways, she's a counselor and spends a lot of time with teenagers, and will share some of her experiences in being able to communicate, to brighten that corner of her own life in her world by empowering teenagers to do the same. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world today. Bye, everyone.